Jez, you are a producer, engineer, musician, and also a teacher at the music college. Which of these professions is the closest to you?
At the heart of it all, I'm a musician. That's what starts everything. But I'm quite a good educator. I've found a way to explain this highly complex set of things that we deal with to people in a way that they seem to understand. And I didn't know I had that talent, but I discovered it through doing it.
So tell me when it all have started for you in music.
I've always loved music. My granddad used to play the piano.
Yeah.
Round after Sunday lunch, someone would say, "Go on, give us a tune."
Okay.
And he'd sit there and play the piano. I thought it was fantastic that he could do that. So I've always wanted to play an instrument. So when I went to secondary school, when I was 11, I learnt to play a brass instrument.
All right.
And a trumpet and a trombone. And when I was 15, I got a guitar and just started playing guitar when I was 15. I think by the time I got old enough to go out drinking, let's say, I thought I'd missed the best decade, the 60s. But actually, when I look back now I'm teaching people, I realised I was around in one of the best decades. The 70s was a fantastic time to be around. And I was a teenager. I saw Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, I can't remember, just everybody, the big greats, I saw them all. They came to my town and I saw them. I had a friend whose dad had worked at the town hall, so when David Bowie came, I had a front row ticket, and it
cool.
just blew my mind. And Ziggy Stardust was the thing for me. That was it. And I loved the fact that he said, "Look, guys, you can wear whatever you like," and I loved that. Really, from hippie culture, we kind of went into glam rock, and then punk rock came along, really, and blew it all away. It's like basically what happened to me when I was 16, when I first went to art school. I made friends with this guy who was a songwriter, and he was basically really trying hard to get a songwriting contract. So he had a tape recorder at home with one microphone, and he would rehearse the song, and he'd get his mates round, including me. On a Saturday, we'd all sit round in the front room and do these demos, and then he'd send them off to London, and he got a bit of interest. So on quite a few occasions I'd come down to London with him just to be his mate and sit in the studio. So I'd be sitting on this side while he was over there performing, and I'd be asking the engineer, "What are you doing? What's that mean? What's this knob do?" and all that. So I got an insight from really early on. Basically, when I was a guitarist in my band, eventually we got a band together called the Monos, and we recorded at a studio called Utopia. And if you look at history, that's where Pink Floyd recorded Dark Side of the Moon. So, Christmas 1975.
Yeah.
Good year. It's when I first saw the Sex Pistols, and it really did change my life. The Sex Pistols never talked about that gig. I've seen them on TV several times, and they never mentioned this gig, because I think it was either their first gig or their second gig. But it impressed the hell out of me, and I'd never seen anything like it. Up until 1975, pop music seemed to be to do with dressing up funny, glam rock was the thing. Music seemed to be quite complex, and punk was the heralding of I suppose youth just taking over and saying, "No, we're not going to be manipulated anymore." And in a way, the 60s did that, but the 60s people had got old, and so hippies were called boring old farts at that time. That was the phrase that we called for hippies. And basically, my dress was hippie. Then I saw the Sex Pistols, and basically the next day I went out and bought a pair of drain pipes and changed the way I dressed and everything, because I just thought punk was it. But they weren't dressed in punk. That was really early. So when they turned up for this gig, they were dressed in old stuff from Oxfam, old suits from Oxfam. They all turned their back on their audience because they were actually too shy. I just thought they were being like, I just didn't give a fuck about us. So, and I was so impressed. And the guy in the pub kept telling everybody to turn it down, and Johnny Rotten just stood there and said, "Fuck off," and put his finger up his nose like that. And I just thought that was brilliant, because I'd never seen anything, and I just wanted to do that. Because it's part of punk. It's like, before punk, you had to be a good guitarist before you could be in a band. Suddenly in punk, you don't have to be a good guitarist. You just have to do a chord, 2 chords, and you're away. And I do enjoy that kind of energy, but I also want some entertainment from it. And
Sure.
If it's just down to rhythm and words, then to me that's not, that's an old-fashioned viewpoint, but it's not complete enough for me. The main change from the 70s to now, I don't know, the introduction of computers, basically the 80s. The 80s, I would say, was where things started to go wrong, because the 80s was where people were taken out of it. You could say in history, up to about the end of the 70s, if you wanted something on your track, you had to find someone to play it for you.
Yeah, true.
And in the 80s, with the invention of the drum machine, although I bought one of the very first ones that ever came out, I kind of go, oh, without the drum machine, you'd need a drummer. So you have to talk to the drummer, make sure he plays the right thing. And the invention of the drum machine and sequencing takes the people out of the music, which is great for a producer. Many producers say, wow, it's great just to be able to do music and not have to argue with the keyboard player about stuff. You just say, play that for me, and it does. On the internet now, it's terrible. There's all sorts of stuff. There's some brilliant stuff, from brilliant to absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
It's all there on the internet. And that is, you could say that's a really good thing. But it kind of gives people a false idea of where they can go with things, because, you get your mates to tell you what they think of your music, and they'll all say, yeah, we really like it. In the general public's mind, I think the idea of what is good has gone way, way down. And that to me is the principal problem with music, that people, like now, something that's not very good, it gets right up the top. And that's disappointing, really. At the same time, there are some fantastic artists about there, and technology brings it to us really easily. I love the internet. I love the way that you can just say, I'm going to give my music away free. I was reading about Beardy Man. He's basically saying, no, you can have my music, go on my channel, it's all there for you, it's all free.
He just figured out basically that people are gonna steal it anyway, so
yeah. But and in this day and age, in the 21st century, you can't think that you can make an album and make a lot of money out of selling it.
It's not happening anymore.
It's not happening anymore. You've got to give your music away free. So from my point of view, I'm an engineer producer. What I've seen is my workload has just dwindled to nothing. Whereas, let's say in 1985, I would have been required for every moment that the musician is in the studio, they need me. Now, basically what happens is people come to me and they say, well, we've got this project, we've done it at home and it sounds a bit shit and that, can you sort it out for us, please? So I tend to, you work with things that people have recorded and they haven't recorded it very well. So I'm kind of putting people's problems to rights, and kind of there, I suppose there's a bit of resentment and bitterness in there, that's what it's come to, because really if you record something properly, that's all you need to do, and play it back. And if you listen to some great records, it seems that's all that's happened. Really, really, some fantastic. The stuff that was happening in the 70s was basically really good performers in front of good microphones, being recorded properly. Bang! You just put all the faders up. It sounds great, and I love music of that ilk. The first studio I worked in was tiny, but we were very fortunate because a band called Aha came in. We'd been open about 4 months, and they did this session with me, and I went, wow, that guy can sing high. And isn't he quite good looking, actually? And so I told my boss, who was the studio owner, and so the story of Aha is they were a Norwegian band and they were looking through the Melody Maker for a studio in London, found our advert because it was one of the cheapest. So they booked this 3-day session with us, and they came in and did this demo, and one of the songs was called Aha, actually. They never released that one. I've still got it on cassette. I've got all this on cassette as proof. So they did this recording. I said to my boss, you should come and see this band. They're Norwegian, and I think there's something to look at there. He basically agreed with me and signed them to a management deal, and got them a flat above the chip shop round the corner. So Aha lived in Sydenham for 6 months, whilst he went and took their demos to Warner Brothers and got them signed, basically. And at that point, he said, do you want to come in on this? And I kind of said, nah, I don't really like their music that much. So I wrote myself out of a very successful thing. But me and Ahad didn't really like each other. They said to me, as a producer, you seem to take all the pop things out and make it interesting. But what we really want is all the pop stuff. We don't want it to be too interesting. So we were at loggerheads with each other. But yeah, they hang around that studio for the next year or so, doing all their demos in the evening. And that's quite a good success story for the guy who ran the studio.
Yeah, sure.
But during that period, the sort of early 80s, I worked with lots of people. I worked with Dex's Midnight Runners.
All right.
Yeah, Kevin Rowlands. That's one of the people I can remember. And there's just there's
too many of them.
There's too many of them to remember. Another session's just popped into my brain. I worked with the Art of Noise.
Okay, yeah.
They were seminal. Again, they made one of those records that you've never heard before, made with a Fairlight. So the Fairlight was the first sampler that you could use, and you could make 8 sounds at once. It blew everybody's mind that you could make 8 sounds with one machine. But yeah, because I'd done some work with another band using a Fairlight, and so JJ Jezelik, who's part of Art of Noise, was looking for an engineer, and someone said, oh yeah, Jez, he's worked with Fairlight. So I got that job through that. That was great time. I had a great time working with him. He introduced me to the idea of events rather than music. So during the production, he would say, we need an event here. And so he'd go off to the Fairlight and sort of try and find a sound rather than a musical thing.
Mm-hmm. What does it take to be a good music producer nowadays?
What does it take to be a good music producer nowadays? Crikey. I think you've got to have an understanding of people. That's what the biggest thing is, people skills, actually. It's got really nothing to do with music, I'd say. It's about being affable, about finding the people that work together. There's not so much skill involved in music now. It's more about judgment. So I'd say you need to be the sort of person that can make quick judgments. There's not enough time in the production process to think about it for too long. Basically we're in a time where you can think of a beat and you can find it very quickly. You can go to your sampler, you can go to EXS24, and you can get a groove up. Mm-hmm. So when someone's playing it and is that the right one, you've got to be the sort of person that can make their mind up very quickly about things. Working on your people skills so that you can be someone's friend whilst you need to be their friend until the music's production's finished, and this decision making. So basically, I've looked at my own career as a producer and think, I do make the right decision, but usually it's too slow, and it's always afterwards. Music success is not about what happens in the studio, really. It's what happens afterwards. So if you really want to be a successful producer, you need to get the business end of it sorted out so that you're not just producing music and then putting it away in a cupboard and doing the next bit. Yeah. You've got to find some way to get it out there and to get it sold. And there's that, it's the saying, it hasn't really changed. Like, basically, as a producer, you're as good as your last hit. In the end, to be a producer, I think you've got to have the assurance that if you like it, other people will.
Jez, what's your opinion on London's independent music scene these days?
What's my opinion? I think it's really not as vibrant as it used to be in the 70s, but it's recovering again. People are discovering live music again, so it's getting better. There's not as many venues as there used to be, and the more venues, the better. Basically, it's very difficult to get paid to play anywhere in London. You can get to play, but normally you play for no money at all, but you get the opportunity to play. Record companies are losing their power, and so the independent music scene does grow, and it's quite possible to have success without a record company being involved. It's as hard as ever to get a break, really. You know, you've got to be really good before people will pay more than a couple of pounds to come and see you live. And I think that's good. I think it should be hard. You know, you should be good before you start taking money off people.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. You know, there are quite a few venues around London that don't cost too much money, where you can go and see people play live. I love that kind of end. But it's not very, very lucrative, and so it's difficult. You know, if you can't really be a musician in London and rely on fees for gigs, really, until you start to build up more of a profile. So you've got to sell some records, really, to get to the point where you can get enough money off people at the door.
So it's not the easiest days right now for independent musicians, producers, etc.
No, it's not easy, but it never was. And the idea, you know, if you've got real talent, you'll win through in the end. You've just got to keep going.
Bye.